You spend your life planning every detail, making backup plans for your backup plans, trying to predict every possible outcome, and still nothing goes according to plan. The job you worked so hard for doesn't fulfill you. The relationship you analyzed from every angle still ended. The future you carefully mapped out keeps rearranging itself, and with each failed prediction, each collapsed plan, each unexpected turn, you feel more anxious, more desperate, more exhausted, because you've been taught that control equals safety, that certainty equals peace, that knowing what comes next means everything will be okay. But here's the truth that nobody wants to admit: the more you try to control, the more out of control you feel. Maya learned this at 34. She was a project manager by profession, and by personality she had spreadsheets for everything. Color-coded calendars, backup plans, contingency strategies. She knew exactly where she wanted to be in 5 years, what her life should look like, what she needed to achieve. And then life happened. Her company restructured, her position was eliminated, her relationship ended, her apartment lease wasn't renewed, and suddenly all her careful planning meant nothing. She stood in the wreckage of her perfectly organized life and realized something terrifying. She had spent so much energy trying to control outcomes that she had no idea how to simply exist without a plan, without certainty, without knowing what comes next. And this is where most people panic. This is where they frantically try to rebuild the same control systems, create new plans, double down on predicting the future. But what if the problem isn't that your plans failed? What if the problem is believing you could control life in the first place? Do you know what it costs you, this constant need for certainty? It costs you the present moment, because you're always 3 steps ahead, always planning for tomorrow, analyzing yesterday. Never actually here. It costs you spontaneity, because unplanned moments feel threatening. They don't fit into your carefully constructed reality. It costs you genuine connection, because you're too busy managing how others perceive you to actually be yourself. It costs you peace, because certainty is impossible, and chasing the impossible is exhausting. Maya realized this one evening when a friend invited her to a last-minute gathering, and her first response was anxiety, not excitement, because it wasn't in her calendar. She hadn't prepared. She didn't know who would be there, what would happen, how long it would last. And she caught herself thinking, I can't go. I don't know enough about it. And in that moment she understood how small her life had become, how much she was missing, because it didn't fit the plan. How many experiences she'd rejected, because they came with uncertainty. And here's what makes this so insidious. You think the planning is protecting you. You think the control is making you safer. Think if you just understand everything, predict everything, manage everything, you'll finally feel secure. But it's a lie, because life is fundamentally unpredictable. And trying to make it predictable doesn't change life. It just makes you anxious, exhausted, and isolated. The philosophers understood this centuries ago. Michel de Montaigne wrote extensively about the futility of trying to control existence. He lived through wars, plagues, personal losses, and he discovered something profound. The more he tried to manage outcomes, the more he suffered. But when he learned to coexist with uncertainty, stopped demanding that life be predictable, something shifted, not in the world, but in him. And that's what you need to understand. This exhaustion, you feel this constant anxiety, it's not because you're not controlling enough. It's because you're trying to control what cannot be controlled. What if you didn't have to have all the answers? What if I don't know was a complete valid response to life's questions? What if uncertainty wasn't a problem to solve, but a condition to accept? This idea terrifies most people because we've been trained since childhood that not knowing equals incompetence, that uncertainty equals failure, that confusion equals weakness. But Montaigne understood something radical. Not knowing is actually wisdom, because it's honest, it's real. It acknowledges that life is complex, that the future is genuinely uncertain, that some questions have no clear answers, and pretending otherwise doesn't make you strong. It makes you delusional. Maya had spent her entire adult life afraid to say, "I don't know" in meetings. She would confidently present predictions. She knew were guesses in relationships. She would pretend to be certain about feelings she was confused about. In life, she would declare plans for a future she couldn't possibly predict, because admitting uncertainty felt like admitting inadequacy. But what if the opposite is true? What if the people who claim absolute certainty are the ones who haven't looked deeply enough? What if confidence in the unknowable is just another form of denial? After her life collapsed, Maya started practicing something uncomfortable. She started saying, "I don't know" out loud. When friends asked, "What's your plan?" she said, "I don't know yet." When family asked, "Where will you be in 5 years?" she said, "I honestly don't know." When colleagues asked, "Are you sure about this?" she said, "No, I'm not sure." And something unexpected happened. Instead of losing respect, instead of being seen as incompetent, instead of life falling further apart, people responded with relief, with honesty of their own, with connection. Because everyone is pretending to know, everyone is exhausted by the performance of certainty. Everyone is secretly relieved when someone admits the truth. Life is not a destination. It's a river, constantly moving, never the same twice, always flowing towards something you can't see from here. And you have two choices. Try to dam the river, or learn to swim. Maya had always been a dam builder. Every time life changed, she resisted. When feelings shifted, she tried to force them back. When circumstances evolved, she fought to keep them the same. When people grew in different directions, she tried to hold them in place. And it never worked, because you cannot stop the river. You can only exhaust yourself. Trying, Montaigne watched his own life flow, watched his body age, his mind change, his circumstances shift, his certainties dissolve, and instead of fighting, he hid something revolutionary: acceptance. Not passive resignation, but active acknowledgement that change is the fundamental nature of existence. He wrote that we are not beings, we are becomings, constant transforming, never fixed, always in motion, and trying to freeze that motion, trying to make permanent what is by nature temporary, creates all our suffering. Maya started practicing this. She stopped saying "this shouldn't be happening" when unexpected changes occurred. She stopped saying "why is changing" when relationships evolved. She stopped saying "I need to get back to how things were" when circumstances shifted. Instead, she asked, "What is this teaching me? How can I move with this? What's trying to emerge here?" And slowly, painfully, liberatingly, she learned to swim. She still felt fear when river took unexpected turns. She still felt grief when currents carried things away. She still felt confusion about where the flow was taking her. But she stopped using all her energy fighting the current and started using it to navigate, and that made all the difference. Because fighting the river makes you drown, swimming with it takes you somewhere. You cannot control the future, but you can be present in this moment right now. You cannot know what will happen tomorrow, but you can notice what's happening today. You cannot eliminate uncertainty, but you can stop letting it steal your present. This is the practice Montaigne developed, and it's harder than it sounds, because your mind wants to time travel. It wants to review yesterday, analyze tomorrow, predict next week, strategize next year. Anything but be here now. Maya noticed this constant mental time travel. She would be having coffee with a friend, but her mind was at next week's meeting, would be walking in nature, but her mind was reviewing yesterday's conversation. She would be lying in bed, but her mind was planning tomorrow's tasks. She was never where she was, and this made everything feel hollow. Because you cannot experience what you're not present, for you cannot connect with people. When you're mentally elsewhere, you cannot feel peace. When your attention is always 3 steps ahead. So she started practicing presence. Simple practice is nothing mystical. When she ate, she just ate. When she walked, she just walked. When someone spoke, she just listened. And it was uncomfortable at first. Because presence reveals things you've been avoiding. It reveals how you actually feel about your life. It reveals what you're running from. By staying busy, it reveals the emptiness beneath constant planning. But it also reveals something else. The richness of the actual moment. The fact that most of your suffering exists in time travel, not in the present. The reality that this moment right now is usually okay. Even when the future is uncertain, even when the past was difficult, even when you don't know what comes next, this moment is usually okay. And learning to return here again and again is the foundation of peace, not the peace of having everything figured out, but the peace of not needing. Here's another uncomfortable truth. You're not one consistent person, you're many. You contradict yourself. You change your mind. You feel differently about things from day to day. And you've been taught this is a flaw. But what if it's just honesty? Montaigne was obsessed with his own contradictions, wrote about them extensively, not to solve them, but to acknowledge them. He noticed he could be brave one day and cowardly the next, confident one moment, and insecure hours later, certain about a belief, then completely uncertain the next week. And instead of trying to force consistency, he accepted this is what it means to be human. Maya had always tried to maintain a coherent identity, strong professional, calm daughter, rational partner, consistent friend. And it was exhausting because she wasn't consistent. She felt different things in different moments. She changed her opinions. She contradicted her own values. She was a mess of conflicting impulses, and she thought this meant something was wrong with her. But Montaigne would say, you're not broken, you're honest. Because the people who appear perfectly consistent are usually just good at hiding their contradictions, good at maintaining a performance, good at suppressing the parts that don't fit the image. Embracing contradiction means letting go of the need to be perfectly coherent, means saying I felt one way yesterday and I feel differently today, and both were true, means accepting that you contain multitudes and trying to flatten yourself into one simple story is another form of control that exhausts you. When Maya stopped trying to be consistent, something liberated. She stopped needing to defend yesterday's opinion. When she'd changed her mind, she stopped forcing herself to feel what she used to feel. She stopped pretending. She had a clear, solid, unchanging sense of who she was. And paradoxically, this made her more authentic, not less, because she was finally being honest about her actual experience. Instead of performing a false consistency, You can't control outcomes, you can only control your actions, and even your actions won't always produce the results you want. This is perhaps the hardest truth to accept. Maya learned this through painful experience. She worked hard and didn't get promoted. She was kind and still got hurt. She did everything right, and things still went wrong. And each time she felt betrayed, as if life had broken a contract. But there was no contract. You were never promised that effort equals results, that good intentions guarantee good outcomes, that doing everything right means things will work out. This belief that you can control outcomes through perfect action is just another form of the control obsession, and it sets you up for constant disappointment. Montaigne understood this. He saw that we overestimate our agency in outcomes and underestimate our agency in responses. You can't control whether you get a job, but you can control whether you apply. You can't control whether the relationship works, but you can control whether you're honest. You can't control what happens, but you can control what you do with what happens. This shift is everything. Because when you release attachment to outcomes, you stop measuring every action by its results. You stop seeing unexpected outcomes as failures. You stop feeling personally betrayed when life doesn't go according to plan. Maya started practicing this. She applied for jobs without attaching her worth to whether she got them. She expressed feelings with needing specific responses. She took actions because they aligned with her values, not because they guaranteed specific outcomes, and this paradoxically made her more effective, because she wasn't paralyzed by fear of wrong outcomes, wasn't controlling every action to death, wasn't so attached to specific results that she couldn't adapt when things went differently. She acted and then responded and then acted again, and this is how you actually move through life. Not by controlling outcomes, but by engaging fully with whatever happens. There's a specific kind of freedom that only comes from accepting you don't know. And it's a freedom most people never experience, because they're too busy pretending to know. Maya felt this freedom for the first time when she stopped having a 5-year plan. When someone asked, "Where do you see yourself?" she used to have an answer rehearsed. Now she said honestly, "I'm figuring it out as I go." And instead of feeling like failure, it felt like possibility. Because when you don't know, you're open. When you're not committed to one specific future, you can notice opportunities you would have missed. When you're not locked into one path, you can pivot. When something better emerges, not knowing means not being trapped. Montaigne called this intellectual humility, and he believed it was the highest form of wisdom, because it keeps you teachable, keeps you curious, keeps you growing. The people who think they know everything have stopped learning, have stopped noticing, have closed themselves off to anything that contradicts their certainty. But the people who embrace not knowing, they're free to discover, to be surprised, to let life teach them things they didn't expect. Maya found that embrace uncertainty made her more confident, not less, because she wasn't constantly defending positions she'd outgrown, wasn't clinging to identities that no longer fit, wasn't pretending to have clarity she didn't have. She was just honest. And honesty, even uncertain, honesty is a solid foundation in a way. False certainty never is. The freedom of not knowing means you can change your mind without shame, can admit confusion without feeling weak, can say "I don't have this figured out" without seeing it as failure. This is the lightness people talk about. The simplicity that comes not from having answers, from not needing. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving in to what is. It's the difference between collapsing under weight and laying down the burden. And this distinction matters because one is defeat and one is wisdom. Maya learned the practice of surrender, slowly, painfully, through repeated failure to control. She tried to control outcomes and failed. Then she tried to control her feelings about outcomes and failed. Then she tried to control other people's reactions and failed, finally exhausted. She tried something she'd always resisted. She surrendered, not to specific outcomes, but to the process of life itself. She said out loud, "I cannot control this." And instead of feeling powerless, she felt relieved, because she'd been carrying a burden that was never hers to carry, the burden of making everything work out, the burden of preventing all problems, the burden of ensuring specific futures, and none of it was ever in her control anyway. Montaigne wrote that the greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself, and belonging to yourself means not betraying yourself through impossible attempts to control the uncontrollable. Surrender in this context means distinguishing between what you can influence and what you cannot, means putting your energy into the first and releasing the second, means saying, "I will do my part, and then I will let go." This is not passivity, it's wisdom. It's not giving up, it's freeing up all the energy you were wasting on impossible control and directing it toward possible action. Maya started asking herself daily, what's actually mine to control today? Usually the answer was much smaller than she thought. Her actions. Yes, her attention. Yes, her integrity. Yes, but outcomes, other people, the future world events, no, not hers, not controllable, not worth the energy of trying. And in this discrimination she found peace. So here you are at the end of this journey, but really at the beginning, because understanding is not the same as living. And living with uncertainty is a daily practice, not a one-time realization. Maya's life didn't become perfect. When she embraced uncertainty, it became real. She still faces unknowns, still feels anxious about the future, still wishes sometimes for the comfort of false certainty. But now she has tools. She knows how to notice when she's trying to control the uncontrollable. She knows how to return to the present moment. She knows how to distinguish between her responsibility she needs to release. She knows how to say or "I don't know" without shame. And most importantly, she knows that not knowing where the path leads doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're walking with honesty. And that honesty, that acceptance of uncertainty, has given her something no amount of planning ever did: freedom to be herself, to change her mind, to make mistakes, to not have all the answers, to live without the exhausting performance of certainty. Montaigne would tell you that this is enough, that you don't need to have your life figured out to live it well. That uncertainty is not a problem to solve, but a condition to embrace, that the peace you seek doesn't come from finally knowing everything, it comes from being okay with not knowing. And if you're ready to start this practice, start today with one simple acknowledgement. Say out loud or write down, "I don't know what happens next." And that's okay. Notice how it feels to tell the truth, to release impossible control, to give yourself permission to be uncertain. And if this resonated, share in the comments what you're learning to stop controlling what uncertainty you're finally accepting, what happens when you let go. Because your honesty helps others find theirs, and this conversation, this practice, this community of people learning to live with uncertainty instead of against it. This is how we all find our way, not by having the answers, but by walking together into the unknown.